Awesome. Got it. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for your help.
Yeah.
All right, terrific. Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the February 13th, 2023 Zoning Review Committee meeting. We are allowed to do this meeting on Zoom based on Governor Baker's sign into law and act relative to extending certain state emergency accommodations, which among other things extends the expiration of provisions pertaining to the open meeting law to March 31st, 2023. Specifically, this extension allows public bodies to continue holding meetings remotely, and that is what we are doing tonight. First thing on the agenda is continued discussion about table of uses as they relate to site plan review and board purview. Eric, did you say that you had Billy Crawford in online here or no?
Correct. So hang on just a second. Let me just stop sharing my screen.
So for you folks at home watching this, Billy had a couple of questions that he wanted us to address briefly, and we can certainly accommodate anyone who has any interest in zoning and upcoming uses and changes and so forth. So we want to give Billy a chance to address the board first thing before we get rolling on our agenda.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for allowing me to speak. I'll keep it simple. As if you remember, Mr. Chair, Chaz, that previously I'd asked a similar question. Are any of the changes being recommended by the zoning board going to allow more residential housing development in our town?
So no would be the simple answer. We haven't not looked at any kind of housing stuff at all. We're not focused on that at the moment. Certainly we can take a look at that at a later point in time, but right now we're focused on changes to the bylaws that we can try and get onto a warrant article for the current town meeting coming up. However, that is not one of them.
Okay, thank you. So you're once again, you're looking at mostly verbiage and cleaning things up as you had done before?
We are looking at some specific things, table of uses, which really gives purview to different boards as to who has the final say on what. There are some things that the select board has that really should go to the planning board and that type of thing. And we're looking at some specific language around some signages, split lots, and the site review, site plan review, and special permits. Those are the things that we're looking at right now. So a couple of things that you were wondering about in your email today, we're not really discussing any of those things right now. Those will be for a later town meeting.
So not the current town meeting. The other thing I discussed was, well, you can pass it on to the members, is about what happened at Toll Brothers and the non-conforming vote that allowed the Toll Brothers from a golf course to 100 units of housing. And that could only require a majority vote. So if you ever should look at that, I highly request that at a minimum, that the vote like that requires super majority, 4 out of 5, rather than just a regular majority. So those were my thoughts this evening. I appreciate you hearing me.
Oh, anytime, Billy, of course. We appreciate your interest.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on with our agenda then. We'll go back to the table of uses that we had been discussing before. If you want to bring that up, Eric.
Sure. All right, everybody can see that?
Yep.
All right, in terms of continuing discussion, did you want to simply, I guess, go back to the top and address items that currently are highlighted yellow? As you might recall, those are the items that currently require a site plan review to determine whether those items still should require a special permit, or if a site plan review would be enough for those uses?
Let's just see if we can't finish off this list tonight and
Yep.
and move on. So,
because I think we got through, or the committee got through just about everything that was highlighted blue. The blue highlights were addressing all uses that were within the purview of the select board. So if we're going to continue that conversation, we would come back to our yellow highlighted items. As Mr. Cropper was asking about the multifamily dwelling item, that's going to be addressed as part of the MBTA Communities Action Plan. So currently that's not something where the committee was planning to address for this town meeting, but it's something that will be coming up in discussions as soon as we can roll in some of NIMCOG's resources, and they have some what they're calling scenario reports available for the community to review in terms of steps to take for compliance for MBTA. So that brings us to assisted living. Assisted living, independent living, and continuing care campus all go together. Independent living is a specific use that by itself isn't specifically permissible for construction. So if somebody has a business plan and they want to construct units for independent living with like age restricted units, but with basically no assistance, maybe some services, but no specific assistance, that's not something that the town is currently permitting. Assisted living, where there is specific care provided to the residents, is permissible by special permit in the B3 district right now. That was defined and added to the zoning bylaw when the continuing care campus use was added. And the continuing care campus is a combination of assisted living and independent living within the same property and operated by a single business, a single operator.
so I think we really kind of addressed this when we put this bylaw into effect a year ago. I don't see any real reason why we want to change it, my opinion.
Well, I guess the reason why it would be changed would be you'd have to determine if it's going to be by special permit or if it'll be by site plan review. But if I interpret your response, it's that you want to keep, your vote is to have it remain as a special permit, correct?
Yes, and let's just take a minute and talk about the difference between the site plan review and the special permit. I've been reading through a bunch of stuff today, and one of the things that I would like to be sort of a trigger for anybody who's trying to apply for either a site plan review or a special permit would be a waiver. If they're asking for a waiver of any sort, then I think it really should not be a site plan review. It should be under a special permit so that we can craft it a little bit more to what we want it to be.
I think that's going to be very difficult to execute only because there's no way to interpret the use table in that regard. It's like, all right, well, we have the specific use and it's by site plan review, but we're asking for a waiver on, let's just pick a random one. We've seen people asking for waivers for the engineering standards for like pipe slope percentages, correct? Mm-hmm. So suddenly that's going to trigger the need for a special permit. I think that's going to be extremely difficult to manage and explain to everybody. So I think you should probably, my advice is to stick to the use definitions themselves and determine what process the authority is going to follow. There's nothing wrong with providing waivers through a site plan review process. There's nothing wrong with providing waivers through the special permit process. I don't think that should be a trigger for what process they go through, because like I just said, it'd be very difficult to determine. And I've been reading through some of the materials as well, specifically Tewksbury's site plan review. Like one of the things that they do to add teeth is that if any of the conditions that a board places on an approval are not met, then there's no permits that can be pulled from the building department. So, I mean, it pretty much stops things dead in the water until they've accomplished what what the board has requested or conditioned their approval on. They can also deny the site plan, application based on a well-defined set of criteria. I think Tewksbury is a little bit too long, but I think it has like 15 items in their criteria, but if it doesn't meet those and you've given yourself enough discretion there, then it's a defensible denial.
Okay. Anybody else have any comments on the difference between site plan review and special permit?
So, I mean, I had this question, I think last time where, the concern is whether the site plan review is going to have enough teeth. And I know you talked about with Tewksbury, when we were going through the table of uses the last time, that we seemed to get hung up on that, right? We were sitting there saying, gee, we really want to have control and make sure that it has enough teeth. I don't know. I haven't seen enough that tells me that site plan review is just as good as what we've been expecting out of our special permits relative to ensuring that the use is controlled enough that people are going to abide by it and that it's enforceable. That was what I had said in the last meeting, and I looked at the what Tewksbury has, and I agree it's a long one. I'm not sure that this committee has seen anything, and maybe it's just a matter of Bob and Judy explaining to us and showing us how that can happen. But I think we did seem to get hung up on that, and I think until we get that, I think it's going to be hard for us to say something can just be site plan review on these types of things like the assisted living and continuing care campus and some of those bigger ones that we had.
And I would actually tend to back that up. So I, before this board, I didn't understand exactly what either one of those meant. And from 2 meetings ago, my, 20,000 foot down explanation, like macro explanation was, special permit, that's a process that needs to be approved, and it may or may not get there. A site plan review is almost guaranteed to go through.
That's completely false. It's not true. A site plan review is not guaranteed to go through. That's why the committee is here, to help define a process that has criteria and specific, built-in enforcement mechanisms that provide comfort level for board members to go through a site plan review process and feel confident that they have enough criteria to point to either issue denial for a good reason with regards to the site plan. In other words, it would be, it's unsafe for pedestrians, or you don't have good enough turning radii in your parking lots, or you could even, like Tewksbury had some elements that had to do with its continuity, with the neighborhood and things like that. There's lots of different types of criteria that you could build in. If the board, the authority, denies the site plan application, they cannot receive any building permits in order to proceed. So the same department that is the zoning enforcement authority within town is the same department that issues those building permits. So the building inspector, building commissioner is the zoning enforcement officer. That's the department that would have to issue building permits in order for construction to start. Those permits cannot be issued unless A, a site plan review has been approved, if that's how it's listed in the use table, or B, if the applicant has not proven to have satisfied the conditions that either the planning board or whichever authority is doing the site plan review has stipulated in their decision.
Okay.
So I think in order to reframe what you're looking at with regards to how to make a decision, whether a use should be by special permit or site plan review, it kind of has to do with what level of comfort you have with the type of business it represents. So if it's a business that you feel confident and is common enough that the town and the community wants to welcome that use to the community, and you really are just focused on ensuring that the design of the site plan is up to spec and it's going to meet the criteria that you're evaluating the site plans for, then site plan review would probably be sufficient. If there are specific operating conditions and things like that, where maybe there's specific, like a marijuana retailer is a great example, right? I don't think anybody questions whether that should be a special permit or just by site plan review. Mostly because there are a lot of specifics about the way that business is operated that the decision or special permit granting authority is concerned about evaluating. And it might not necessarily be covered in the host community agreement that gets issued. But a restaurant that's going to be operating, a restaurant might be something where it's a fairly common type of business. It's something that the community wants to welcome. And you can pretty much imagine how any restaurant's going to operate. But you know, this restaurant on this parcel might be set up differently than a restaurant on this parcel, even if they're in the same business district. And you might want to go, you're going to want to go through a site plan review to identify how the traffic's going to flow. Where is the curb cut? How big is the building? How, you know, what are some other elements associated with how they're proposing their business to be constructed or their building to be constructed? That's, I mean, it's still up to you whether you want to make, but that was just an example. You might still say, well, we still need restaurants to be a special permit for one reason or another, but that's, I'm trying to give an example with regards to certain uses that you might feel more comfortable with and say, well, it's really just the design on the ground that we're going to be concerned with that use versus how the business is operated. And I'm not stating this because I have a specific opinion about which way it should go for the assisted living and continuing care campus. I'm just trying to clarify for folks that how to help make a decision about altering your table of uses.
Thank you for that clarification, Eric. That makes it much clearer and easier to understand. Appreciate it.
Oh, good. Thanks.
All right. So assisted living and the continuing care campus, in my opinion, we'll leave them the way they are. Anybody else have any concerns about that?
I agree.
All right, shall we move down to business uses? All right, so we have retail store less than 5,000 square feet. We have it, let's call them exceptions, if you will, in R3 and I1. I guess, well, in my opinion, I don't really care about industry if it's in I1. I think maybe we would really want to take a closer look at in the R3 district as to exactly what they're going to try and do. So perhaps that should be more of a special permit rather than just a site plan review. I don't know how anybody else feels, but that's why we're here.
Yeah, I agree. I think we've locked down some of the stuff or made it a little bit more difficult in the industrial districts for whatever reason, but I think a site plan review might be appropriate there. And special permit in the R3s.
Anybody else want to chime in? All right, let's move down to the next one then. Retail store more than 5,000. I think that one's fine. Chime in if you disagree, please. Professional offices of more than 15,000. I'm fine with those as being a site plan review.
Site plan review for B3 and B for B3, B4, and I1.
Yep. Is that good for everybody?
Is there a reason why you'd want it by special permit versus a site plan review if the business districts are, especially in the B3 district, if it's designed for business use? I mean, it's pretty much the ideal use for that district, or one of the ideal uses, that plus retail, right?
I thought I had said site plan review.
Yeah, he said
Oh,
site plan review
sorry.
for all three.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. For offices more than 15,000?
Yes.
Okay. And sorry about that, I missed it.
that's
While
fine.
we're on these uses, and I know they're not highlighted yellow, we don't have to follow an exact formula here, but the professional offices that are less than 15,000 square feet are currently by special permit in the B1 and B2 districts. I just was hoping that the committee might be able to weigh in on that. If you can say we want to skip it because it's not, doesn't have a -R at the end.
I don't understand why B2 is not a permitted use for professional offices less than 15,000 square feet. Because my understanding is B2 is that's supposed to be office and professional. Now, I guess the question would be relative to that, where we have currently B2, is that because that's the more towards the center of town and there was a concern about those? I'm just wondering if we set up our zones in places rather than thinking about what the definition was for B2.
I agree with you. I think that less than 15,000 square feet would be, I mean, that's almost what the definition is.
I thought that, you know, office / professional was B2.
It is.
And we're talking about professional offices. But again, I don't know if we'd have to pull up the map, but if we did the map such that they put B2 in a place that we don't want to have professional offices.
Right, and that's a great example, right? So you're saying, look, we want, the whole point of this is for this district is to have professional offices, but because the district is sensitive in that it's close to, it occupies a large area around the town center, we do require a site plan review for any proposed use for that. So I think this is it's good to talk through it this way because we've come across an example where the use matches the definition of the district pretty well, but there's a clear reason behind requiring a site plan review, like you just explained.
Mm-hmm. So I could see us doing for B1 and B2, rather than special permit, do site plan review in B1 and B2 for professional offices less than 15,000 square feet. At a later time, we could debate whether that area should be B2 or whether it should be something else.
Yep. Does anybody disagree with the note I put in here? I said,
can you read it because it kind of goes off the.
I said that for professional offices less than 15,000 square feet, you know, these are currently identified as by special permit in some districts. The committee expressed a desire to encourage this use in the B1 and B2 districts with site plan review.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Is there any reason why, while we're at it, is there any reason why we would want financial services, which seems like a use that would be operating in a professional office, by special permit?
I don't see one. I think that should be a permitted use.
In B2?
In B2, yep.
And then maybe a site plan review in B1 rather than special permit?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
This might be a dumb question, but what is financial service compared to office, like the professional office building?
I'll read you the definition. A bank, loan agency, or similar facility. It's like one of the shortest definitions in there.
So basically like a, yeah, like a drive-through bank kind of place, I guess.
There could be money changing hands.
Gotcha.
I'm just going to make a quick starred note that says that if there's going to be any drive-through proposals, that it would trigger a site plan review. Now, that would be a characteristic specifically about, I guess, the operation or the configuration of the site versus like the request of the waiver.
Yep, I think that's good.
Yeah, don't forget we had a little thing that came up with the marijuana dispensary with the drive-through as well. I don't know
Yep.
if that kind of triggers it, but.
All right, so here we are down at restaurant, where the only districts where it's permissible by right is in the B3, B4 districts. Everywhere else, it's by special permit with site plan review, with the exception of the R3 district. Discuss.
I think I'm fine with that.
Special permit versus site plan review in B1 and B2.
It is review, right? A site plan review.
With a special permit. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but Eric, we would be looking to change that from SPB-R to be SPR, right?
It really depends on what you as the committee recommend for the town. So with restaurants, do you feel like there are a lot of specific operating nuances that, you know, a special permit granting authority is going to need to review? Or is most of the review that takes place have to do with the way the building's going to be configured or the way the traffic's going to flow? So is most of your criteria, you know, it could even be architectural. In other words, you want to know what the facade's going to look like and things like that, rather than, you know, what type of food are you serving, or, you know, is it an all-night operation, something like that. Even those are things that you could potentially impose conditions on with a site plan review.
Which I think those are things that we would want to be able to control.
Right.
Traffic flow, parking, building design, sure, yeah.
I mean, keep in mind, even in your most important district, like in the well, when I say most important, in the most active district, right? In your B3 district, the retail corridor, you know, restaurant wants to go in. If somebody wanted to do Olive Garden, depending on how you configure your requirements, one of the things that you could be doing is, regardless of the use, if the construction has to do with like either a certain size or something else, it could trigger a site plan review based on how much construction is taking place. You know, maybe you set the limit at 5,000 square feet, so that so it kind of matches a little bit more about where you set the limits for retail stores and/or professional offices.
Members of the board, any comment?
I could see having B1 and B2 just be site plan review, and same thing, I guess, with I1. Keep special permit in the R3.
Which is is that what we have now then?
In the restaurant row, it's by special permit in R3, which I think makes sense when you have residential district.
Yeah.
It's by special permit with site plan review currently in B1, B2, and I1. So consider moving those to just site plan review.
Yes,
That's what I was advocating. No, it's a special permit with a site plan review. It's double duty.
Okay.
Right, Eric?
Right. The idea here is that you're coming in with a different perspective with regards to what you're reviewing. It conveys to the business community that you want restaurants in those districts, and you're really only concerned with public safety and architectural continuity and things like that. So that brings us to restaurant for fast food. That is just like restaurants, it's permissible by right in the B3, B4 district. It's by special permit with the site plan review currently in the I1 district. Did you want to make any changes?
I'm fine with that.
Do we have, relative to fast food and industrial, do we have concerns that rise to the level that you want to have a full special permit with the planning board? Or do we want to look at just a site plan review for that?
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of communities, obviously fast food restaurants have a very special, I don't want to say meaning, right? So they get special attention from communities, mostly because they have a different type of impact on the traffic that enters them. It might have an impact with regards, some people view it as a potential source of trash. I mean, it really depends on the operator, right? So you can have some fast food restaurants that are absolutely gorgeous, run perfectly smoothly, are great community members, and you'd want 3 of them in your community. But then there's others that are the complete opposite. So it's a matter of by incorporating a special permit process for the fast food restaurants, it signals that the community is not opposed to them, but is adding scrutiny.
Yeah, I'd keep it the same.
Okay.
I'd keep it the same as special permit.
Agreed.
I mean, as the economic development director, I'm torn. Because I want to be as friendly as possible and bring in as many businesses that want to invest in Tyngsborough as possible, whether they're fast food or anybody else. But with it, to be honest, considering all the other things that the town wants to scrutinize with regards to special permits, it's a little surprising to me that it's permissible by right in the B3 and B4 districts. It's one of the only areas where I would say, I don't know if the community would be opposed to a special permit process for a fast food restaurant in those districts. Unless the community has expressed so much interest to say, our community is perfect for drive-throughs. Our B3 district is great for that. We're on the south side of Nashua. We want more traffic through there to support our businesses that are in that district. So keep it as permissible by right. So I can see both sides.
And that's the Dunkin' Donuts and.
Sure, Mac and Chews and Dunkin' Donuts are a great example. Those are 2 fast food drive-throughs in the B3 district that are technically permissible by right.
I mean, we could at least put a site plan review on it to deal with maybe the traffic and if it's drive-through. But were we looking at having something that if there's any drive-through, it might trigger a site plan review anyway?
Well, this is exactly what I was referring to, this section.
Yeah, I think if we're going to have a drive-through, we would want to make sure that in and out is fine, rather than just say, okay, go ahead and do it.
Right. That way you don't have the community saying, didn't somebody review this? There's
Right,
a traffic problem or something else. So it gives you a chance to put some eyeballs on it. I don't disagree. So I said the permissible by rights for fast food restaurants in B3, B4 should be site plan review. It'll remain by special permit in the I1 district.
Yep, I like that.
Yes.
All righty. Brings us down to craft breweries. Currently within the, so we actually
You already did those.
that one.
Yep. A little bit more now. Motel, hotel inn, we want to look at those.
Those are special permits. I think those should stay there with the planning board as special permits.
Yeah, okay. Well, we've knocked off a lot more than I thought we had. So we can Professional services. Do we want to take a
Yeah,
look at that?
here's a few that I didn't highlight that might make sense to address in the B1, any of the districts for that matter. Personal services, general services, and studio. These are definitions that could probably use some updating, but that's not the topic of discussion tonight. But in terms of like the way you'd envision the general uses for these, as a reminder, I'll bring up the definitions of those. So for personal services, these are building establishments such as that involve the care of a person or his or her apparel, such as a barbershop, laundry, dry cleaning, diaper service, shoe repair, steam baths, salons, health clubs, pet grooming, clothing rental shops, etc. Currently, those personal services are by special permit only in B1, B2, and I1. They're permissible by right in the B3, B4 district. So B1 is like your neighborhood district. B2 is your office professionals. Do you view those districts getting a little bit more mixed? Do you want to keep personal services by special permit only, or?
I'd see those as being a site plan review rather than special permit.
I think I'm in agreement with that.
Okay, so just to be sure, one of the things a scenario that I wanted to bring up is that with our existing table of uses, we've had scenarios where there's a use that requires a special permit with site plan review, but it's a business that's going into an existing building, right? So from a planning perspective and a permitting perspective, what we do is we ask for the application for essentially a use special permit because they're not constructing anything, and there's really not much to review with regards to a site plan. So in this particular case, the reason I bring it up is if you've got personal services, so let's say you've got a salon that wants to go into an existing building, and it's listed in the table of uses as site plan review. If it's not new construction, it's not going to trigger any review, which I'm assuming is okay. That's what you're intending, right? So if the building's already been constructed, you already got your parking laid out, people should be able to go in and out. If it's a use that's permissible by site plan review, but it doesn't involve construction, it's considered a permissible use.
What about like waste and things like that? So if you're dealing with a salon and there's, the water and the chemicals, my understanding is site plan review would be more than just relating to construction. It should be the proper handling of traffic and waste and all the other things. Is that not accurate?
Well, it's not 100% accurate only because, restaurants produce waste as well, right? But there's standard regulatory elements that they have to have in place to meet building codes. So they have to have a grease trap, they have to have other elements. If it's a salon, I think they have also, similar health inspections and other requirements that they go through. So from a planning and operating perspective, I'd be less concerned, at least from those examples, about what would get reviewed. And I think if you had specific concerns about a business that either the regulations were not discretionary, but not so specific that the town or the community was concerned about, what would be going on there, then you might want to consider it to be a special permit. That way you'd say, look, if you're not constructing a building, we still want to see you before you operate. That would be potentially a special permit.
Let me ask another question. Because we said we'd like to hit the low-hanging fruit on some of these. Do we run into some challenges relative to these three? And, we're trying to be friendly, economically friendly, but not give up control. Do we have a lot of businesses that indicate that we're not friendly in dealing with professional services, general services, and studios at this point?
So if I may, Mr. Chair, I'll bring up a couple of examples and you might remember a few as well. So the one that comes to my mind was like an aesthetics product company, I believe. So she wanted to set up a retail shop that sold like creams and things like that. And I think she had to go through an entire special permit process to basically explain like it's her passion in life and, she's going to be setting up a store. And it seemed quite onerous of a process for a very small entrepreneur that wants to operate in like a 1,200 square foot storefront. Let's say she wants to operate on a 5,000 square foot storefront. It seemed like a benign use, but it was something, the town had put up I don't want to say obstacles, but hurdles that they had to go through that, other communities might not have in place for similar uses.
So can we back up just a little bit and maybe ask if this shouldn't maybe fall under the select board, these types of businesses that really are going into an existing space rather than something that they were going to have to construct? Eric, how do you feel about that? Because we do see.
I don't think the select board would be the right ones to get into that level of detail.
Yeah, I think overall, if you wanted to try to match or have some continuity from community to community, so that way if somebody says, well, doing business in Tyngsborough is totally different than anywhere else around them, if we're trying to avoid that, I would recommend not pushing that to the select board.
Okay. Then we had the dog grooming service come before us on the planning board.
Sure.
And it's sort of like we're making decisions that are financial decisions for the town, as far as taxes and that kind of thing. And when it comes to just businesses, I guess I think that maybe that would be more of a select board type, but it hasn't been, and I guess why change it then? Okay.
Well, I guess that's the thing, right? So, I mean, if you come up with uses, hopefully Tyngsborough's review of the use table requires the community and the committee to start questioning, or at least trying to get more comfortable with the market, doing some of its job, meaning somebody created a strip mall. Jay Patel has, 4 units in this building at the Bridgeview Plaza, and he's got a nail salon and a convenience store, and he's got 2 units open. It seemed like the dog grooming business is they decided that space was correct for them. Is that the type of scenario where the community wants to say, whoa, the market said that it was, a great spot for this business, but we want to weigh in on this. We want to be able to say, no dog grooming at that building. Or, there are other elements within this personal services definition that you're just not comfortable with. And you'd say, yeah, somebody who's an elected official in town is going to need to be reviewing these businesses before they operate here. Or do you say, we created these districts to invite these types of businesses here. We have to get comfortable with the fact that they're going to move in and things are going to run more smoothly with regards to, landlords and small businesses that want to operate there.
Well, I guess my spin on it would be, I would like to make this as easy as possible for businesses to come in here and not have to go through a special permit. But yet I don't think that really site plan review is for a business that wants to establish itself here in a building that's already been built and permitted. And I just want to make it as easy as possible for business to come through in a situation like that. Yes, if they were going to be building their own building, well, that's a different scenario.
Sure. Yeah, so while the definition itself can be revisited, the way if it doesn't change at all at Springtown meeting in terms of like these are examples, obviously, barbershop, laundry, dry cleaning, shoe repair, salons, health clubs, pet grooming, clothing rental, your basic small business retailer. Could or should those be permissible by right in the neighborhood and B2 districts, basically the districts that are essentially closer to your center of town and south of the center of town?
I guess I'm saying I would like to see that, yeah. Make it permissible.
What do you think, Eric?
I mean, given some of the examples that you provided, I think it might need more than just a site plan review. I guess the way I was looking at it when we first started talking about it is if it was obvious, then we wanted to switch it, right? Sit there and say, yeah, put it in site plan review. what is the downside to keeping it the way it is now? Work with the site plan review process, tweak that, and then put some of these, make more of these that are special permit into site plan review.
I'm not sure if I'm following the question exactly.
Phasing it in. So phasing it in, right? So if I take a special permit, something that's special permit right now,
Okay.
and I have, let's say that there's 50 of them, 50 different ways that I now have I have special permit, and rather than doing, obviously we're not going to do all of them to site plan review, but what would be the downside to saying, you know what, let's do 10 of them now that are obvious, put them as site plan review. We see how that works. And then after a year or two, we sit there and say, yep, this works well. We completely understand it. We know exactly how site plan review works. We're good at it. There's these other 5 or 6 things that we kept as special permit. Let's move those as site plan review.
Well, yeah, I apologize for complicating the decision-making process of the discussion tonight, because it's probably a lot easier to make those decisions for items that are in the current table of uses that have site plan review already in it, like the site plan special permit. I kind of interjected a few saying, oh, by the way, as we're going by them, here's a couple of items that are by special permit. They don't even currently, include site plan review, right? And I said, well, while we're here and we're looking at the table of uses, and that's the response you just gave is perfectly fine. Say, look, we're not here, but we're not interested as the committee. We're not interested in making any changes to items that are only listed as site plan. I'm sorry, we're not interested in making changes to items that are special permit, right? We're trying to make these incremental improvements. That's fine. I'll say, great, we'll come back to it at some other point, and I'll leave it blank. On the other hand, you could turn around and say, well, while we're looking at this table, it does seem crazy to me that personal services are by special permit in the B2 district, while they're permissible by right in the B3 district. Or you turn around and say, nope, again, the B2 districts are close to our town center. We need to have eyeballs on it. If it's the wrong business, if it's the wrong building, if it's the wrong operator, if it's the wrong anything, we need to be able to say no. So that's why it is special permit in B2. And that's why I'm just bringing it up for discussion. Like I said, I'm doing my very best to try to not have I have opinions mostly about process as best I can, but I want to make sure that the committee and the community is making their decisions about where they want to have scrutiny.
Yeah, and I have no problem you raising it. I think it's a good question. It was one of those ones that I'm struggling with going completely into either a permitted use or as we looked at it, a site plan review isn't going to get it done. So like, for example, professional services in B2, the definition that we have of personal services, not professional, personal services was pretty vague. And so maybe that's why I was a little bit more concerned about that.
Well, again, as we've said, this is an ongoing process. This is something we can review for the next town meeting as well, or a couple of town meetings down the road. If we're not comfortable making any changes as we're moving forward here, then let's just not make them right now.
Sure.
Let's let it play out and review it after we've gotten some of these other things squared away. So.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what anybody else thought. That was my opinion. So,
well, and a valid one too. I mean, we don't have to change everything right now. I think we originally decided we were going after some low-hanging fruit here, and I think we've done a little bit more than just that at this point. So, if we have some things that we have questions about, let's let it go and move on.
Yeah, I think right now you're working with a defined district of B2. Your town center, and then you got your table of uses, and they all kind of have to work together. But there hasn't been a lot of discussion about, okay, well, what are we really envisioning? Not just for the little part of that's the town center around the bridge, but what do we envision for whatever is currently districted as B2? And that's a broader conversation. So I can see how that might come up. That'll be later. All right, so I can't remember, I can't tell you how many applications I've had so far for people looking for their airports and their fixed wing aircraft. Since we allowed them by special permit and site plan review in the I-1 district, I'm sure that we're probably going to be looking for, at the very least, a special permit, right? Because that's a very complicated entity.
Yeah, and I wouldn't mind seeing that one just go away altogether, but I don't think we have the area in town to be becoming Logan Airport. Or...
Yeah, what do you guys think about that? Is it just a waste of space and text?
Well, how big? Because I mean, what about like drones and some of the other types of fixed wing aircraft?
Well, it does say airport. So
I actually am a pilot. I have an airplane.
Yeah, here's the go. Let's get that. Yeah.
At Nashua Airport. There is no way that I could see where there would ever be an actual airport in the town of Tyngsborough. You know, obviously there are water planes that land on Lake Muscoppic and the river, you know, for practice, and that's fine. That's not an airport. There's I'm an airplane guy. I love planes. I love the fact that there's an airport in Nashua. As far as Tyngsborough goes, that really doesn't, I was shocked to see anything concerning airports here. I don't understand why that would be here at all.
I like what you've written there, Eric.
Okay.
Heliport, Larry, would you consider that to be sort of the same thing, or?
No, so that's different because you don't actually need a runway. You know, obviously, you would, the town would want a special permit for anything like that when you're launching something, you know, up in the air from.
Or you could have like a rescue services organization that decides to locate or put their facilities in Tyngsborough or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Boarding houses, yeah, that should be special permit, I think.
Boarding houses are only listed in the R3 district, which I guess kind of makes sense.
Well, I don't know where else we would put it. I mean, in industrial, maybe. I think it's fine where it is. Anybody else have any opinion?
I don't see a need to change that one.
Okay. I don't know why I can't find the definition for that. Boarding. Wait, we really should recodify our zoning bylaw so it's easier to find the definitions. Oh, good.
They're at the end, alphabetically.
There it is.
I found it. Yeah. It's one word: boarding house.
So yeah, it's any structure with one or more rooms designed, occupied, or intended for the occupancy by the same persons for more than 1 week as separate living quarters for one or more roomers, boarders. I mean, I don't know the neighborhoods around Muscoppic Lake much. Muscoppic Lake has a lot of R2. It's an R2 district, mostly surrounding the lake. I mean, is there anything on the ground already that even seems remotely similar to that, or structures that could potentially operate that way? And would it, what just happened? Did Excel just crash on me? Oh, the host disabled screen sharing. How's that? I'm the co-host. Raquel, if you're listening, something just occurred in that.
Yeah, I know. I was trying to make myself the co-host because for some reason I was on a call with Bernie and he says we can't record the meeting for some reason. It's not on the live public television. So I was trying to fix it.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry about that.
No, it's okay. No worries. Can you share your screen or no?
I think, is everybody see the spreadsheet?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, good. Awesome.
It should be in the recording anyway. So yeah, I guess my only question was, does the R2 district already have structures around Muscoppic Lake that you thought, for whatever reason, should be considered for boarding house use?
I wouldn't mess with any of the residential districts relative to that.
No worries.
That's my recommendation.
All right, that brings us down to the industrial uses for warehouse and mini warehouse. And since all of us want to avoid pitchforks and torches, probably want to keep all those as special permits, which is fine. Construction yard. Let's see here. I mean, for folks who are on the zoning review committee or anybody that's watching this meeting, I'll mention that there were adjustments made to the definition for mini warehouse, mostly in response to the, I don't want to say extensive, but the, I guess, adequate amount of coverage that the town has for self-storage, to put in criteria so that if additional applications came before the planning board, they had some additional criteria to point to for a denial if there was already adequate service in the area that they were applying for. So just wanted to mention it. So construction yard, it's a facility or area for storage, open or enclosed, of construction equipment or materials. It's isolated to the B4I1 district, which I would assume makes sense. Although I don't really have an opinion one way or the other if it should be special permit or site plan review.
I think we can leave those alone.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking through all of those.
Well, I was going to put in I'll refrain from adding my own personal opinions there. So I scrolled down to heating, fuel sales, and service. It's currently permissible by right in the industrial district. Considering the materials that they're using and their potential impact on the environment, did you want to consider changing that to a special permit?
I think so, yeah.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we had it as a P because it was just, there was one already there, and it's like, well, but it's for new stuff.
Okay. Heavy manufacturing. These are heavy and light manufacturing are elements that I think the community really needs a revamp on those. We had some brief discussions somewhere about trying to encourage different types of more modern employers to come to town from life sciences or pharma or different types of manufacturing, and some adjustments to the language there would help. And potentially even getting more specific. So if you incorporated other uses, you could say that you have enough regulations under a specific type of use where you can permit it by right if it's under these types of criteria. But I don't think we're ready to incorporate that type of language just yet. So if we're focused on heavy manufacturing and light manufacturing with vehicle sales and repair in between, does anybody have any opinions on what they'd like to do there?
I think those are fine the way they are.
Okay, I'm glad that light manufacturing is already permissible by right in the industrial district, so that's good. Heavy vehicle sales and repair, I agree. You're probably going to want to know more about it. And heavy manufacturing, asphalt, yeah, definitely. Concrete, fertilizer, all those types of things should remain that way. Right, waste treatment. You know, if the town has the right spot, they could probably charge a boatload of money by creating a waste treatment plant right now. Everybody needs it.
Yeah, you want pitchforks, right?
Waste recovery, that definition has thrown me off a couple times when I've had to visit it. Any process designed to treat, alter, clean, filter, distill, separate, or by any other method, recover a usable material of liquid from a waste product prior to or as an alternative to disposal. So we allow waste recovery by special permit from the select board in the I-1 district. And we actually, oh, sorry, I'm already discussing something we already covered. Sorry about that. It's going to remain the same, but we mentioned that we might want to separate out some materials for composting, public transit vehicle parking. All right. Storage, truck terminals, slaughterhouses, solid waste disposal, massage parlors. Biological research, that is the element we've already discussed briefly. Adult entertainment we've covered. We've covered fairs and festivals. All right, I think you just wrapped up your table of uses review.
Right.
I can help process that information with Bob and Judy, turn it into sort of a summarized amendment so that it can be reviewed and proposed to the planning board and ultimately town meeting.
Great.
Yeah, and Eric, if you could, I want to, for the ones that we're going to change, I want to get that in front of the select board. Okay. Because I did tell them that I would come back with some of the changes, and you and I can work on that.
When is your next meeting?
We have a meeting on the 27th.
Okay,
I don't know if we'll have
time
I'm
out for a week, but
yeah, I don't know that we're gonna have time for it anyway. But maybe the one after that at a bare minimum. But I can work with you on it just to pull out the ones that are going to change, and then we can give them as a reference point the full table so that they can see what that is in case they so choose.
All right, at the very least, this I've tried to make sure that this spreadsheet, even though I'm editing it in Excel, I've shared it so that it can be accessible through Google Docs as well. Google Sheets, I should say. All right, stop sharing, go back to the agenda.
All right, so next on the agenda is to discuss adjustments to the zoning bylaw to address the separation of special permit and site plan review processes.
Right. So with considering that it's only been what, I guess technically 3 town office days since the last meeting, I've only had a chance to read through the special permit process for one municipality, one community that Judy sent over, which was Tewksbury. And I think Tyngsborough can do better. I respect my friends over in Tewksbury. They have a pretty extensive list of requirements and criteria. I think that it can be simplified to a certain extent. However, I did feel like there were elements that I highlighted because they did put in some teeth, on their process that I'm hoping will help make various boards, the committee, and the community itself feel more comfortable with elements that would be changing to site plan review only. But I'll need more time to synthesize that and come up with, I guess, draft language. And I encourage all of the zoning review committee members to look through the 4 examples that were there and identify things where you feel like it's either over the top or things that you say, we absolutely want to have this in Tyngsborough for our community.
All right, so I read through the 4 of them, and I had a couple of things that kind of stood out to me. One of the things what they was in there was putting stuff into the instead of having it come before the planning board or the ZBA, or we just had the town administrator or the town manager decide on whether it needed to go or not, or giving them approval or giving him approval, or to just say, okay, yeah, this is fine. I would not want that in our site plan review. I would like to see that stay with the boards. The other thing I would
The
like
Tyngsborough community doesn't really have enough staff resources. I don't think it would ever go to the town manager's office to begin with. But I mean, even if you were trying to put that specific authority, put that in the hands of staffing right now, because so many of our departments are one-person departments. I agree with you that there's just not quite enough resources to do that. But go ahead. Sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Chair.
No, I mean, I'm just going from things that I saw and read on there and compare them to ours. I think that it would be nice to have sort of one paragraph that defines the exact timetable of when things come in and when they have to be, stuff be distributed to different boards, and what triggers what, as far as if something has to be sent to the registry of deeds, or if a certain period of time goes by, or it automatically becomes no decision, which is the decision. So I think something that just shows that, okay, in 45 days this happens, at 90 days this happens, that kind of thing.
Sure.
One other thing that I would like to have put in there is that either the chairman or maybe the entire board, when a site plan has finally been determined and approved, that a Mylar gets signed, so that there can be no question about what was agreed on and when it was agreed upon. Those are the three things that really kind of stood out to me that I would like to see as part of our site plan reviews.
Can I bring up one really important element? And I kind of know where some people might fall, and I want to try to encourage a slightly different perspective.
Sure, yes.
By statute, special permit requires a supermajority approval, and a site plan review, I believe, you can determine what your approval levels, like, what your thresholds are. But because if the community's identified a use as something that you want to encourage, but want to review the site plan for, consider having a simple majority approval for those elements, just so that things have a slightly less anxiety-ridden process to say we got to have 4 out of 5, which is potentially a very high bar, for something that the community's already said, we really just want to make sure everything's okay, versus, I guess a lot more stringent of a process.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, and Chaz, I saw the administrative plan approval, and I was like, I don't know if that'll work here. Right. But Eric, are you talking about maybe having a major plan review and then kind of a minor plan?
That would be a totally different subject. I'd be happy to try to address that, because it might not be a bad idea to incorporate into this round, because it's completely non-existent right now in the town's procedures and bylaw. I was specifically talking about what threshold is required by vote to constitute an approval. So for a special permit, you have to have a 4 out of 5 vote. For a site plan review, the community can decide to maintain a majority vote for an approval, which is what I would consider in agreement, I guess, with the principles behind the adjustments that you're making to the table of uses. So
Toll Brothers was a site plan review, as I recall. Is that...
Well, I don't know if that's a great example. Mostly
we're talking about going to 3 votes as opposed to 4 votes.
Well, the reason why I'm saying I'm not sure if it's a great example is because A, it's not. All right, so maybe it is a good example. So because of the process that it went through, the special permit procedure, the process that was required, it essentially received its special permit. That received its special permit from the ZBA. So once the ZBA determined that that use was not detrimental to the neighborhood, et cetera, and granted an approval, legally, I believe that the threshold for that vote at the ZBA was a regular majority. And then it still required a site plan review from the planning board. At the time, and even today, the town's definition of site plan review and special permit are so intermingled that Toll Brothers essentially said that they would consider it a denial if they didn't get 4 out of 5. So the entire process that they went through was to get 4 votes. So I feel like that's a very special scenario. Maybe if we went back to the table and picked out something that was by site plan review, the restaurant, right? So that was one that we had talked about early on. When we came to it, we said, yep, that's something that we'd want to see by site plan review. Is that something that should require a supermajority or a majority vote? And I'm not saying you need to make this overall decision just based on that one use. You'd want to go look through the rest of the table of uses and say, more than half of the ones that we've identified for site plan review, I believe, are so important that we have to have a supermajority. Okay. Hopefully I'm not sort of misdirecting the committee, and I don't want Judy and Bob to come back and say, Eric, you spent 20 minutes talking about something and you can't even make it a supermajority requirement. If it's not a special permit, then it's going to need to be a majority, and that's the way it is. That's the whole point. And that you might want to re-review everything that you've decided to confirm that that's where you're headed.
I'll open it up to the board. Anyone have any thoughts on this?
Well, I was thinking of it more than just the vote, right? And that's where I was kind of going with that major and maybe you have a minor, because there may be some uses that we want to have a larger scrutiny, and some of these other smaller ones might not need to have the same level of scrutiny, even though it's a site plan review, and have those tiers and have it include not just the level of scrutiny and the process that it goes through, but the vote requirements. That may be way too complicated, though.
I would tend to say that sounds overcomplicating. So if you came across a use where you felt like the scrutiny was that important and that you didn't feel comfortable enough saying that the threshold is just a majority, that would require additional discussion to determine whether or not it really should be just site plan review and maybe it should be special permit.
So then at the very beginning of this, if we've already established something to be a site plan review, can we then just throw it back at the applicant and say, no, we really want this to be a special permit, so that it does have if we're saying it's 3 votes or 4 votes,
right?
And it's a site plan review, but we feel that it should be a 4 votes. How in the process do we fix that?
You fix it now. So you do it through your zoning bylaw, not discretionary, like we're going to make a decision whether we're going to make this hard or easy when they come before you.
So do we break this thing up so that there's an easy site plan review and then a major site plan review to determine?
I think that's what Eric was just suggesting, and I think that definitely overcomplicates it for applicants and for staff to manage in terms of educating the public and everything else about it.
I think it has to be one way or the other. And personally, I think that if an applicant knows they need 4 votes, then they know they need 4 votes. And I think most of the applicants want 5. So I would like to see site plan review and I'd like to see them both stay at 4. Jeremy, what do you think? You're out in the field quite a bit. You see these things.
Searching for my unmute button. I like how it is right now. Well, at least from a control standpoint, having the, but to Eric's point, I guess that was the big question was, can you tier it? It makes sense if you're trying to get it some of these lower uses so they don't have to make it so onerous. But I don't know. I'm kind of torn. I'm just kind of enjoying the conversation because I don't really have a full opinion one way or the other at the moment.
So if we were to go back to Toll Brothers again, and I know that sort of weaved its way through the permitting process in a way that not everyone was happy about. And it sort of got dropped into our planning board's lap. I was very glad that they needed 4 votes because I think that it makes the applicant work a little harder to please the board, to make sure that we're getting all the things that we want, because they know they need 4 votes and they don't need just 3, so they can say, well, we're not going to do that and we're not going to do this, and they know that 3 votes and they're all set. So that makes me nervous that we're really shortchanging the town by allowing it to be 3 votes rather than 4.
Well, I'll star this and make it another note to go back to Judy and Bob from a technical perspective, just to see if there's anything else that I could advise the committee on in that regard, so that just basically to confirm that, yes, the town has, I guess, the discretion to specify that site plan reviews threshold is a 4 out of 5 vote. Because if she turns around and says, no, that's legally impossible under Mass General Law for something that I'm not aware of, like right now, I think that is possible. But I just want to confirm she might turn around and say that it's not for something I'm not aware of. That way the committee's considering those with the most accurate information possible. Something else I was going to mention in terms of going back to her. So special permit, site plan review required with 4 votes. Sorry, if I recall the next thing I was going to say, I'll bring it up in a minute.
Okay. All right, so we're really kind of looking for answers for Bob and Judy at this point for a lot of this stuff.
Oh, I remember what it was too. One was that. Right. So I'm just out of, for context, Tewksbury's, the reason I brought it up is they require just a majority vote of their quorum for a decision on a site plan application, by the way. They did require a public hearing for their site plan reviews, which I thought might have been a little strange. So I'm going to be asking about that as well. That was the other thing I was going to bring up.
And to be perfectly honest with you, although it doesn't, it can extend a meeting if you open it up to the public. I think having public input is paramount in what we do on any board. So I would certainly like to have public input in a site plan review or anything else that comes up before a board.
Okay. And then one of the reasons why I was trying to separate or not involve language like a major minor with regards to site plan or special permit or anything like that is that language is typically referred to when it comes to modifications, and that doesn't necessarily mean that it's any easier. So when it does come to modifications, people tend to reference those terms mostly because they come up in the 40B process. So Chaz is familiar with this and Jeremy's familiar with this because we've brought it up at the planning board multiple times. Currently, the town doesn't really have a process to determine whether a modification to a plan or a special permit is major or minor. And I do think that it's possible that you could come up with criteria. This is one element where I do feel like staff has the capacity to review a modification. And if they had criteria to compare it to that says, if the footprint of a building changes more than 6%, it's a math equation, right? So, I mean, they're not using their judgment. They just have to verify something. If there are specific criteria that staff can compare or measure a request for a change against, and the town has already said, great, if it only changes that small amount, then we don't want to waste everybody's time, including the boards, going through a review. So the staff can sort of issue a decision or allow construction to continue. But if results above that threshold, then the staff says, nope, I'm going to inform the building department that you can't continue with that change unless you get permission from, the special permit or the site plan review authorization, or the board that issued you your special permit or site plan review. Now, I think that might be a little bit too much to chew, to define and chew for a spring town meeting, but since the words major and minor came up and I've gone through that explanation, it does seem like something that I would love for the committee to have a discussion about so that we can maybe incorporate some of that language in the future.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. All right, so do we have any more discussion, or we really want to hear more from Bob and Judy on this subject?
Does anybody second my observation with regards to Tewksbury's site plan review criteria? Like, I actually didn't finish reading through all 15 of them because I looked at it and I said, really? 15 criteria for the site plan review. There might be a lot of areas that you might be taking into consideration, but my feedback to Bob and Judy, if they're going to help us craft any additional language, would be, I would hope that Tyngsborough's could be more succinct.
Yeah, I agree with that. That looked like an awful lot of things to me.
Okay. A lot of other elements made perfect sense. And now I also see where the minor major might have come up, because I finally flipped over to page 28 of their bylaw and it says minor site plan review. So I hadn't gotten to that. But okay.
All right, do we want to move on to our next discussion item? Which is
yes.
Educational institution use of digital signs or message centers.
Yeah, I mean, I kept that element on the agenda because at the time that I had to publish it, I really didn't know if I would get any additional materials from either manufacturers or the schools. I don't have new information to present to the committee tonight about that. I did leave a message for Eric Gitchner, and it's not his fault with the Greater Lowell Tech that he didn't get back to me yet. It was kind of late, so I'm working on getting some specifications, and the next time we meet, we can work that in. But it sounds like everybody's sort of in violent agreement that yes, we want something that's going to work. We just need to make sure that whatever gets incorporated into that language is A, appropriate for the way they want to use them, and B, we've tried to think of all the, I guess, regulations that the community might be interested in sort of imposing, how far it is from the road, how bright, et cetera, how much does it change? It's not rocket science, but we've already listed those elements out, so we know what we're looking for in terms of language.
Yep, okay, good. Confirmed draft language for addressing split specific scenarios of split lots. We had sort of talked about 50%, I think, at the last meeting. Are we in agreement that 50% is where we want to be with that?
I'm going to let the rest of the committee answer, and then I'll chime in if needed.
Eric, were you in favor of the 50%? You're on, I think you're muted or something.
Oh, something happened to your headset.
There we go. Now you're muted. Now you're on.
All right. I got one on my headset and I got one on Zoom. I guess I'd want to understand what the implications are of going with 50%, because it just seemed, if you encroach, if you're allowed to go 50% into that, that seems like a lot and might be more than just a small variance, given some of the lot sizes and where those things were. So I wasn't sold on 50%, but 25% may not be enough. So I guess I'm looking for a little more feedback as to whether 25% would be enough, whether 50 is too much, whether 50 is not enough. I guess I don't have enough examples in my head to look at it and say, gee, would that meet the needs of the people that are looking for that split lot change?
So I could maybe weigh in just briefly on that, Chaz.
Sure.
So I agree. I would agree with you that 50% sort of like just a flat number saying that's how far you can go with the B3 use might be quite a bit, especially considering the size of some of those lots. I think the 25% range is useful and makes sense as a threshold. And I think the way Bob had written it was, if the committee thinks that that might not be enough in certain scenarios, that an applicant could request by special approval. And then if we agree that, yes, some sort of special consideration by the planning board would be adequate, we have to decide exactly what process that would be and what's the threshold. But then they could go up to 50% at the board's discretion, which I think, given that all that flexibility, that's a process that makes sense.
Jeremy, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on the fence between 50, like 25 and 50%. I guess it's just I wouldn't want it above 50%. But that range sounds about right to me. I'm just kind of, I'm not aligning with what either one at this moment, either 50% or 25%, but somewhere in that range.
Okay. Larry, your thoughts?
So as lots are unique, what Eric proposed is kind of perfect. I mean, 25% is reasonable to get out of the box, and then you've got the ability to go to 50 with approval of a board. Boy, that sounds good to me.
Okay. Then do we want to approve 25%, or do we want to think about this a little more? Or I mean, I'm fine either way, because basically what we're saying is we will allow 25% as a right. And if the applicant wants more, then they can come before the board and say, well, I really need 70%.
Well, actually, no, they wouldn't be able to go beyond 50 the way it's written and proposed, and the way it's been discussed.
And what would that wording be then?
If an applicant is requesting an encroachment into the industrial district for a B3 use, yep, of more than 25% area, then they would need special approval from the planning board, but they could not receive any more than 50%.
Okay.
That sounds good.
And just to play devil's advocate here, if it was 50%, then they couldn't go any more at all. Is that right?
If they got the special permission, but yes.
Okay, all right. Then you can dial me back to 25%. I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Is that where we want to be as a board, or? Okay. All right.
Yeah, and I think, Erica, you're going to be looking for us at some point. We're going to have the rest of the folks. Maybe we'll have a larger set of participants, and we can maybe vote on each of those items.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably you don't even have to vote right now. I can go back to Bob and Judy, create language that's been drafted. I mean, technically nothing's being presented to the planning board yet, so we're still kind of in working session. So as these materials get created, then you can review them at some point, like right before the public hearing is scheduled. We'd want the committee potentially to be making a motion to say, this is the language that we're specifically requesting the planning board to discuss with the public and take into consideration for presenting to town meeting or something like that.
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting we would vote on this tonight. I was just trying to get a consensus to move forward. I would like to have all 6 members involved in any vote that we have. So, yep. Okay, so the next thing we have is there's some amendments to the floodplain bylaw from FEMA. Could you share those with us, Eric? Because I'm very interested to hear what they have to say.
I don't have something to bring up on the screen. I apologize at the moment. I mean, I could probably dig through it, but I don't know how useful it's going to be. Essentially, a representative at the state level for FEMA reviewed the bylaw that was just recently revised at town meeting and came up with some components that they're suggesting that the community incorporate. They do not remove. They certainly don't remove any regulation. They strictly they're intended to improve and increase the, not restrictions, but the scrutiny that the town is putting on any development within the floodplain. And I have a meeting scheduled with the town engineer, who's one of the liaisons with the FEMA representative, to go over that language, because there was one component that, even as town planner, I felt like I didn't want it to be misconstrued or abused by applicants. So we're going to be looking into those, but they include things like correcting the dates for the maps that are referenced in sections 213, 00, and 21. They reiterate or request that we add in language that says along water courses that have a regulatory floodway designated in the town's firm encroachments are prohibited, including fill, new construction, substantial improvements, and other development within the adopted regulatory floodway, which is something that I think everybody assumed was the case anyway. So if FEMA really wants us to add it in, we can. But the one section that I want to discuss with them it's followed by, unless it has been demonstrated through hydrologic and hydraulic analyses performed in accordance with standard engineering practice, that the proposed encroachment would not result in any increase in flood levels within the community during the occurrence of the base flood discharge. And I was like, why would we even incorporate that language if we weren't anticipating any development in the floodway to begin with? So I'll have that conversation with them and provide you some feedback. I can't see why they'd want that language in there. They asked us to put in language that said end in accordance with the state building code. I find that to be kind of superfluous, because if it doesn't meet building codes, shouldn't be happening anyway. And then they were requesting that we make some minor changes to the subdivision bylaw that basically references the floodplain district by saying that all subdivision proposals and development proposals in the floodplain overlay district shall be reviewed to assure that such proposals minimize flood damage, that public utilities and facilities are located and constructed to minimize flood damage, and that adequate drainage is provided. And I looked at some of these, requested edits, and I'm like, really, we're going to spend a lot of time like advertising and having hearings and proposing this to town meeting and everything else. But when FEMA says we want you to address this, I'll at least have the conversation, because it all seems pretty, almost redundant.
So when we had this floodplain bylaw, wasn't that mandatory from the state?
Yes. Yes, we incorporated all the language they were already specifying for us. So I don't know if this is somebody, I know that she's relatively new in her position, so I don't know if she combed through everything, was looking for things that, she thought might be helpful to make changes for. At the moment, since I haven't had a chance to speak with her, I don't know if there's very specific reasoning behind it that says, well, we had a problem in this community because they didn't have this language, or everybody's incorporating this language. We've asked every single community to do this. And, we throw up, I don't want to say throw up our hands. We'd say, okay, well, if everybody else has been asked to do it, then, why are we going to say no?
And so when is your meeting? Is that already been scheduled?
Let's see here. I asked Jake to schedule it with us. Let me just see if I can find it.
Well, it would be before March 7th, our next meeting, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm in the wrong calendar. Hang on a second. I don't know if I don't think that's been scheduled yet, because I would assume it would be sometime this week. I think he's reached out to her and asked for dates.
Okay. All right, good. Anything else anybody wants to rehash here, or are we good to adjourn? All right, just to review, we're all getting together on March the 7th, and that will be remote as well.
Correct.
I believe that's at 7 o'clock too, correct?
It is. And I know that it's almost impossible to schedule another meeting with some of the members that are missing. We don't have Bob and Judy, but I guess maybe we can pick 2 dates for people to take into consideration, because if we wait all the way until March 7th, maybe potential dates that are potential today won't be potential anymore by the time we get to the 7th. So I'm kind of hoping we might be able to come up with some options maybe that I can review by email.
So you want to meet again before March 7th? Is that what you're?
No, I agree. I don't think we have time. That was tonight's meeting. That was the purpose of tonight. Right. And you accomplished, I think, everything that you had set out to. So if we meet on the 7th, the committee probably should meet at least one more time to go over things that either that would be the 7th will be just before the scheduled public hearing for the planning board on the 16th. If that first meeting is held and the planning board and the public has, you know, requests or concerns or other things, it probably makes sense for the zoning review committee to try to meet sometime during the week of the 20th or the week of the 27th.
Okay, so this really would be if in fact we did have some negative feedback from the public and the planning board then?
Right.
Okay, but if in fact we don't, then we really don't have to meet, as this is just sort of a...
I guess that's true, right? So if the select board, at the very least, if the select board and the planning board looks at what the zoning review committee has submitted for a draft language and everything else, and things are going great, and nobody's asked the zoning review committee to do anything else in preparation for to either close those hearings, make adjustments, or get ready for town meeting, technically, I guess you wouldn't have to have one. You know, your job up to that point would be complete. But just in case one of the boards says, we want you to go back to the drawing board and give us answers about this or reconsider that, we would at least have some dates on the calendar held.
Does the 21st work for everyone?
First.
That could work for me.
That would give us 2 weeks from the 7th. And we at which point we should have had feedback from both planning and the select board.
Yeah, we'll look to get on the select board for the 13th. Because we have the meeting on February 27th, which I don't think we'll be able to fit. We can try, but I don't think we'll be ready at that point anyway. But
well, I think we want to have it after the 7th regardless. So
exactly. That's why I was thinking the 13th would be perfect. Then you get your planning board public meeting on the 16th. If we meet on the 21st, there's also a select board meeting on the 27th if we need anything else. But
all right, let's plan on that then, if that's in agreement with everybody.
now let's put it in as a placeholder at
Yeah.
a bare minimum, and if we don't need to have it, we don't need to have it.
Right. Okay.
That'll give you 48 hours too, right? Because you've got on the night of the 16th, you'll know whether you're going to need it on the 21st, which gives you the 17th and the 20th.
Oh, that's a good point. No, you know what? We'll probably we can just post the meeting anyway. So like, let's
exactly
canceled. I just cancel it. Not
right.
Yeah.
All right. And we are good to go.
I move to adjourn.
Take a second.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much for your time, everyone. Good night.
Yep. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.